Hey, what's up everyone? Ben at ProFixerr, and today on the channel we have a Samsung Note 10 Plus that is here for a screen repair. This particular one has broken glass and also broken OLED, but either way we'd be replacing it with a full front assembly anyway. I'll be walking you through all the steps that I take to replace the front assembly on this Note 10 Plus successfully. Everything on my workbench, including this awesome blue heat mat, is linked up in the description below. So be sure to check that out, and also don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and please comment below what you'd like to see in future videos. Without further ado, let's get started on this Note 10 Plus screen repair. Here in front of me on the bench, I have a Note 10 Plus that is sitting here on my blue heat mat. If you watched any of my other videos, the blue heat mat is one of the best tools that you can have on your workbench. It is absolutely amazing because it keeps your devices that you're working on at such a constant and thorough temperature. Using a heat gun does help to heat up a particular area of the screen or a particular area of the device, but in order to ensure that all the adhesive is malleable and pliable, the blue heat mat is second to none and is the best tool that you can have on your workbench and is my most recommended. Today we'll be replacing the screen on this Note 10 Plus. It's a pretty easy repair, and it's actually just about the same as fixing even back until like the S6 series, because the back is glass, everything has a metal housing, and the screen is adhered to the front. The same basic build to each one of these. This one does have, however, a little bit different connector for the NFC coil. So if you've done one of the S6 repairs, you can probably do a Note 10 as well, because they're pretty similar builds. The first thing you'll do is go ahead and place it on your blue heat mat that's set to 60 degrees. I always like to place this one face down or back down until the front starts to get warm, and then flip it over and start working on the device. The reason for that is all the heat will have soaked into the back, into the frame, and then once you start to feel it warm on the front and you flip it over, you know that the device is completely heat soaked and completely warm and malleable, so you can pull this apart. The things we'll be using on this one here will be a razor blade and a plastic playing card and a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. So the first thing that we'll do is go ahead and start on the side and insert the razor blade until you touch the frame, and then kind of lift up the device just a little bit. You don't actually want to pry anything, you just kind of almost want to slip the razor blade in so that we have this ever so slight gap right here. You do want to be very careful because there are a couple different bends in the back glass, so definitely be careful there. But go ahead and drip a tiny bit of isopropyl alcohol in here, and this will make it so much easier to insert the card and to pull the back glass off. Go ahead and take your plastic playing card and insert it into either side of the razor blade. Just be very careful and kind of use a little bit of a wobbling motion to it. Go ahead and remove your razor blade because we no longer need that. And then go ahead and just kind of slide up on the edge. The main thing that we're doing here is just fatiguing the adhesive. We really just want to wear the adhesive down just a little bit. We're not going to do any prying of the back glass because that's going to put too much undue stress on the glass, which could actually cause damage. As you work up on the edge of the device with your plastic playing card, use a tiny bit of isopropyl alcohol. Try to keep your device on the heat mat to ensure that it actually maintains its temperature, because the more that you lift it up, the more it's going to cool off and the harder the adhesive is going to work through. So just continue to work your way up. As we can see, it becomes very easy to do. And this way, we're not prying on the back glass, we're not doing anything that would cause it any kind of damage. And by using a little bit of alcohol, it helps to lubricate the adhesive just a little bit so that the card slips through pretty nicely. So just continue to slide it down. And as you can see, I really don't have the card really inserted that far. It's only about 1/4 inch in. When you're working around the corners, those can be sometimes a little bit difficult. You may have to lift it up at that point, but you basically want to do a little wobble on the corners to kind of get it to work its way in. And if your corner of your card is getting a little bit worn down, you can go ahead and exchange it for another one. Just go ahead and kind of work your way around here, using a little bit of alcohol as well. Basically, the main thing is don't take the confidence of working around the device with your plastic playing card and working through the adhesive to not needing alcohol later on. The alcohol is a very vital part of it, and it definitely makes your job much easier. So definitely use it, throughout the whole thing. I just don't use a whole lot. You don't need to soak the device or douse it or anything like that. We'll work around that corner there. Just kind of want to run down the whole side here, and as you can see, it just lifts right up pretty easily. And if you can notice, using the bottom of the card to kind of measure, we have the little red pattern with the white pattern. We're about 1/4 of an inch in. It looks like about 1/4 to 1/3. So we're really not that far in, which does make it nice. We're not putting a lot of stress on the actual back glass. Going to round off this corner here. And just kind of go really slowly. You don't want to work about any kind of prying. I'm really not pushing hard. Very easy process to do. I do feel a little bit of pressure right here in the middle, and I'm not sure what exactly is going on. The adhesive could be caught or folded, causing the card to catch. I could actually be on the wrong side of the adhesive. One thing that I would do at this point is don't try to lift it up or anything. Just go ahead and put a little bit of alcohol in there. And then use a little bit of a sawing motion to see if you can work your way through. So we worked our way through. That was nice. So very easy to do. Kind of round this corner again. And I almost feel like I'm on the wrong side of the adhesive, but that should be all right. Sometimes that can happen. If it is, we'll have to replace the back adhesive. But peeking in, it looks like all the adhesive is actually on the actual back glass, so that's nice. I don't want to lift it up any farther than that. I just basically did that to confirm the edge of the back glass adhesive positioning there. I'm going to work the way down this edge over here. There we go. And this side looks pretty good too. Looks like we're on the correct side of the adhesive for the most part. We've got some little residue there and whatnot. Perfect. So now it looks like this is pretty loose. Don't be deceived though, because at this point, if you do try to lift it up and you do have a tacked down portion here, you could actually crack the back glass. So don't just go ahead and lift up. You do want to fatigue all of your adhesive and cut all those little spider webs, and then let the back glass come up easily. So looking down the edge here, sometimes you can see in there and see where the webbing is at. We're going to cut that off. And as we can see here, this is actually what we felt there at the bottom. So the bottom with that card, we did feel that. I think it got twisted and pulled right there into the middle, so that's fine. I'm going to pull that one off because it's completely come loose. One of the things that we'll do is we're going to straighten up this adhesive right here. We don't want it to ball up later and to forget about it. So there we go. So that works out perfect. Realistically, I'm just trying to flip that little edge over. Awesome. So now when we lay it back down onto the front of the device or the back of the device, it'll lay completely flat. So what we're going to continue doing is we are going to continue working on the blue heat mat, because there are other components like the battery and the vibrate motor and some other ones that are adhered in. So we do want to have the device warm for that. So go ahead and take your regular cross screwdriver, or your Phillips, and remove all these screws here. So there we go. Alright, perfect. Now that we've removed all of those screws, and there was actually quite a bit more than I had anticipated, but that's alright. We're going to go and remove the back covers here. These are like the little antenna covers, and they have some of the little antenna lines in them, so definitely be very careful with those. Don't want to damage or twist them, because they could actually catch on the board itself and cause damage there. So just working on this here, you do want to peel this little guy up here. Peel it off the bottom speaker and then off of that S pen on the side. You lift it right off the board. Definitely be very careful with this. This is actually an area of the board that does get damaged very easily, so definitely want to be careful there. What we'll do here now is we do want to unplug the battery, so that way everything is discharged. Unplug all the other FPCs, and then work very carefully unplugging the rest of these connectors here. The main thing is don't dig under with any kind of tools. You don't want to do any of the, intrusive prying or anything like that. Just kind of go easy on it, lift it up very naturally, and everything should come off just fine. I'm going to pull the SIM tray out using a little needle on our alcohol bottle. Going to go and set this off to the side. Definitely keep track of the SD card and the micro and the nano SIM card. And then now we're going to go ahead and remove everything else from the board itself, or from the housing. So taking out the cameras, be careful there. You do have 3 cameras over here that are exposed. Do be very careful with those. You don't want to cause any kind of fingerprints on them. And let's see, we should be able to pull out this motherboard at this point. There we go. I'm going to set that off to the side actually. And now let's go ahead and see if we can't lift up this bottom speaker here. Easy enough. And now we can see there's a couple different screws here for this bottom charge port, which won't be too hard to pull out. Perfect. So there those go. What we'll do here now is we do want to, we can probably leave those connected actually. Just lift up on this charge port itself, pull it out. It does look like it is connected here on the side, so we'll have to figure out how to get that out. I can't remember if I'd done one of these before, maybe we have. But I cannot remember exactly what we did for this particular item. But the first thing that I would do on looking at something like this, because I don't believe I've actually faced this particular obstacle before, is I would just kind of take a look at it and see how exactly it would need to come out. And then just kind of wiggle it a little bit. Don't want to put any kind of undue pressure on it because that would actually cause issues if you pried in a way that was not supposed to happen. So this one looks a little bit easy to pull out, so let's go ahead and work on this top lobe here. And truthfully, I do not see the way that this one is going to be coming out. So what we do at this part is, I'm going to go ahead and look at our new replacement part here. Maybe that can give us some clues on how deep it comes out and also where it exactly sits. So that one does look like it's just actually shoved in the hole there. Doesn't really look like there's anything else. So I think we should be pretty safe to just go ahead and lift it right out. Maybe we put a little bit of alcohol in there. It should be totally fine. Alcohol seems to evaporate and not cause any issues that way. So I think we'll be safe. And there we go. I think it just needed a little bit of alcohol in there to loosen it up. It did feel very secure in there, but it does look like it came out extremely easily with just a tiny bit of alcohol to loosen it up along the way. So we're going to set that off to the side. And we can tell here that our new assembly does have the OLED cable there. But it does look like we do need to remove the battery, and it does look like it has another one of those right over here. So we just kind of, let's put a little bit of alcohol in there as well. That should just come right up. Yeah, there we go. It's had a tiny bit of tack in there. So now we can pull it up. Taking a look at the rest of it, it does look like we've moved over just about everything else except for the battery. This one does have the vibrate motor and also the ear speaker, so that does make it nice. I would actually remove those afterwards in order to harvest them to keep them for future repairs in case you do run across one where it becomes damaged or if a customer needs it for a repair in itself. It's always great to have fresh parts on hand, and you can always pull those from the housings themselves. So I'm going to put a bit of alcohol into the battery cavity and let it soak for just a minute. While you're letting it soak, we can actually start to move some of the other components into this new housing here. We're going to go ahead and pull that off. This little piece of tape is to protect that LCD or the LCD cable there. And I'm going to pull this one off here, and also going to pull this one off to reveal the front camera lens there. So what we'd want to do first, we would want to put the battery in and things like that, but but it looks like we're going to wait just a minute. So we're going to go ahead and put this into the bottom of the housing here. Go ahead and insert that in. Drop this one into the side piece here. And now we're going to go ahead and take some of these little screws and we're going to go ahead and screw this in. Perfect. So that looks good. We should still be able to slip the battery underneath there just fine. We should be able to actually unplug it right here on the bottom. Yeah, there we go. And then we can actually flip it up, be able to insert the battery, and everything will be just fine. Perfect. So this one here, I do believe we should be able to pull the battery out now. Let's kind of move that off to the side and use the back end of an iFixit tool. As long as you're inserted all the way into the housing, you won't have to worry about any kind of battery issues. But just kind of hold on there and kind of pry up a little bit. And your battery will loosen. And right now I'm not lifting up on the bottom of the battery or stabbing it. Just kind of lifted it up just a tiny bit. I'm going to set that off to the side because I believe we have everything out of that housing there. I'm going to go ahead and pull the rest of this adhesive off. Add a little bit of alcohol if you need to, and then get a paper towel. Perfect. Got it all cleaned up. And so now that we have it all cleaned up, we can then inspect and see, where exactly our pry tool was prying on. And as we can see here, you do have some slight marks in the actual outer casing of the battery, but it's not actually any kind of dents in the cell itself, so we're definitely good, and it's definitely a safe way to do it. So definitely the recommended way. And what we can do here, it does look like possibly there is some type of battery tape, which maybe there isn't. Maybe there's just a very weird coating on there. So I'm going to take a look at this over here. Yeah, it doesn't look like there's any kind of coating on it. It looks like it's just a coating that is actually on the actual housing itself. So what we're going to be doing is I'm going to take some a little bit of Tessa tape and go ahead and apply this directly into the bottom of the device. All right, perfect. Go ahead and peel that up. I'm going to go ahead and lay the battery back down in there and give it a little bit of a wiggle to make sure that it sits completely flat. So that's working out great. Going to bend this cable down again and reconnect it onto the bottom charge port. Perfect. It does look like we do have a little bit of a lift on this bottom port here. I want to try to figure that out and see where we are going wrong here. Look at the housings, they look definitely very similar. Sometimes you can see like a little extra tab or something like that. And I think we're just maybe not inserting it far enough into the bottom of the device here. Definitely want to be very careful because we don't want to cause any kind of damage to this. But if you can see here, it looks like it's sitting up just a tiny bit, which is a little bit more than we had expected. And actually, now that I squeezed it there and looked on the side, it's sitting actually flat now, so we're good. So that one is sitting great. Thought it was going to be sitting up a little bit too high, but that is actually doing fine as it is. There are a couple different screws that we do need to put into here. The ones that I would look for is you can hold over your speaker if you can't remember which ones were supposed to have screws in them. One of the good things with the Samsungs is the ones that do have like that little chamfered collar on them. Those are the ones that seem to have screws in them from the factory without anything between them. A little chamfered collar definitely seems to help. Hold the screw on there without causing any kind of damage to the actual PCB. But one of the tricks is you can hold over your speaker or whatever else would go over it and see where the holes don't line up. And whichever ones you need to place in, you can at that point. So put these 3 in here. So now that we're connected all the way on the bottom, we technically could go ahead and put this in. Perfect. At this point we can go ahead and turn off our heat mat. We don't need that on anymore. I'm going to go ahead and put the rest of these screws in actually in the bottom. Alright, perfect, and those look like the whole bottom half of the device is done. Now all that we have to do now is go ahead and place the motherboard in and get everything else aligned with the front cameras and then put that rear back glass on. So what you want to do at this point is go ahead and take a look at the device itself to make sure that everything is in as it should. Go ahead and compare it as well to the old housing to make sure that you've moved everything over. Very occasionally, but usually never on the on service pack screens, you'll ever have anything missing. But if you do have like a refurbished screen or something like that, you do always want to make sure that your microphone filters and then any other protective foam or copper padding is moved over as well. If it's not moved over, go ahead and peel it off carefully from the old device. It works best if you have it on a heat mat. It's set to 60 degrees and the whole device is hot, because then you can peel it off pretty easily and place it onto the new one. And that helps immensely, especially because it gets you the closest OEM repair as possible. Alright, so we're going to take this little sensor here and install it in the new screen itself. One of the things you do want to watch out for when installing something like this is you do need to notice that you do have open spots on the back of your housing. This can be a dangerous area, especially when tightening down a screw during final assembly, because you could accidentally slip and jab the back of the OLED. Especially, let me show you something here. If you notice, whenever you start to tighten this screw down, let's say you go ahead and push on the screw head to give it that one last tighten, you'll notice that the screen starts to lift on the opposite side. That's because this is one of the curved screen displays. With that being said, if you do push and your screen lifts up and you're not paying attention, you could accidentally slip, because then it repositions your screw from the actual screwdriver. So definitely be very careful in those situations. Hold down the device and be very cautious with how much pressure and how much attention you're putting into each of the screws as you're putting it into the device itself. And definitely tread very lightly, because these are not cheap displays and they would take a lot to replace. So the next thing to do is go ahead and take the logic board and we're going to place it back into the housing. The most important thing to check for at this point is going to be the positioning of all of the flexes. You can generally take a look at the top of the actual motherboard to see where you're going to have flexes coming across to make sure they're all accounted for. And then also just take a visual inspection of all the ones that are inside the housing as well to make sure that you're not clamping down any of them inadvertently. So being very careful to not touch the camera lenses, I'm going to go ahead and place the bottom of this motherboard directly down into the device itself. It always seems to work out a little bit easiest this way, because you do have these little feeler tabs at the top, and they do squish in to the top of the housing pretty easily. But as we can see here, we have the 3 wide flexes here at the bottom. We have our battery FPC, we have the S Pen, and then we have this little sensor here. And it looks like we have the S Pen sensor, and then we have the button FPC there. And it looks like they're all accounted for, so we're going to go ahead and place the motherboard down in there and give it a gentle push. We don't want to push too hard because we don't want to cause any inadvertent damage. And then as well, if we did actually inadvertently clamp an FPC, we're then able to feel where it's actually at. But this one doesn't look like we have any issues here. So let's go ahead and connect up our connectors here. Just be very careful. It's definitely not a race. Perfect. And before we go ahead and put that last battery connector in, we're going to go ahead and connect our camera on. But before we do that, just in case any kind of debris or dust has dropped in there, go ahead and take some canned air and gently blow out the crevice for it there. Now that we have that blown out, we can now place our camera directly into the little cutout. Perfect. And checking all of our FPCs to make sure they're all connected. They all look absolutely perfect. Going to go ahead and connect our battery up as well, and then we're going to connect everything else onto the back of the device. Looking here, you can place that one there. We're going to take this one and lay it all back over top of all these other components. Looks like everything is laid flat. You may have to lift this up just a tiny bit to reposition it so it actually fits right into its little cutouts, and so everything lays as smoothly as possible. One thing I'd do at this point is we do want to make sure that everything powers up flawlessly and that everything's all recognized. Go ahead and just put a couple of the screws back in, especially where the connectors are. We do want to make sure that everything is connected as it should, and if we take a look at the back side of all this, we can see that there is one last connector that we do need to connect in, and it's actually one that does get damaged quite often. So what we need to do is go ahead and line that one up, which the way that we can do that is we're going to pull this off here, and we almost actually forgot it in this one, just to be completely transparent, but go ahead and fold back the little metal bracket there so that we can see the connector on the motherboard itself. Go ahead and plug it in, and it doesn't actually snap like the rest of them do. It is like a little bit more delicate connector, so definitely be very careful there. But now that we have that one connected in, now we can go ahead and put in the rest of these screws. Be very, very careful. We don't want to, slip or cause any undue pressure on any particular area. And essentially what we're going to do is, just so we can test it, we're going to put all the screws back into this metal back plate, and then we should be able to power on the device and test it. Make sure all the touch still works, make sure that it's powering up as it should, and then we should be good to final assemble it. Alright, perfect. So what you need to do at this point is definitely be very careful of the open cameras, and don't flip it over and lay it on your workbench. You don't want that to happen there. Go ahead and power on the device. And as we can see there, we got a Note 10 Plus 5G, pretty cool. And while it's powering up, you can go ahead and insert your SIM card tray back in there. This is also a good time as well to be able to check for any kind of dust and debris that is inside of your camera lenses, and everything looks good there. And it looks like it's powering up just fine. Alright, perfect. Now that it's booted up, we can then go ahead and draw the pattern and ensure that everything's working. One of the things I always do recommend is dragging down for the top and then drawing a square and then drawing an X a couple times. This definitely helps to exercise the digitizer to see if there are any dead spots, and then also you can drag up from the bottom and then just see if it loses touch from your finger, and kind of do the same thing. Do a square, then do an X, and make sure that it follows your finger the whole time. As long as it does, then your digitizer is most likely good, and everything tests out perfectly. On these service packs, they rarely ever have an issue. I don't think we've run across one that has. So the testing will definitely go pretty flawlessly for you on that part of it. So as long as everything's done great and you've done test calls and ensure that the device is fully operational, go ahead and insert the rest of the screws, and then we're going to go ahead and put this back glass back on. One of the things that we're going to do with the back glass is we are going to add a little bit of primer to the actual housing itself. We want to make sure that this back glass is going to stay on and flat, and that the adhesion is like OEM. As long as you've pulled off the back glass very carefully, fatiguing the adhesive, not prying, and following all the steps in this particular video, your back adhesive on the glass should look pretty flawless. I'm going to show you mine here in just a second after we double check these screws. So if you're at the same point that I am, go ahead and check all the screws on the back housing to ensure that they are all tightened up sufficiently. If not, if any of these are not tightened up, or if one of these plastic covers for the antennas is slightly lifted, it can actually cause damage to the back glass if it's kind of protruding up a little bit. But all of ours seem to be sitting completely flat, and everything looks great that way. We can kind of feel it around the edges. What we're going to do now at this point is we're going to go and take some of our adhesion promoter, our Tessa primer, and we will be adding a little bit around the edges. Using a Q-tip, we can go ahead and just pull straight from the actual jar itself, and we can paint right around the edge here. And you don't need a ton of it, but it does help to get enough to make this surface completely painted and completely wet. And so we do like to apply it a few times, making sure that the Q-tip has sufficient to spread around on the surface. So working along this side over here, one of the things you do want to be very careful of is make sure that you don't get this into any of the buttons or onto any of the cameras. If it does get onto any of the cameras, you'll have to replace the camera. There's really no way to clean it. This stuff is so viscous and so nasty that it's definitely going to get itself down the side of the lens and is basically not going to be able to clean out. So that is something to keep in mind. What we're going to do is, if you have your device, as mine is, with the primer on it, go to inspect your adhesive. As long as it looks the way this one doesn't have really any kind of dust spots or anything like that in it, you'll be ready to place this back onto the device itself. One thing that I do like always is go ahead and blow off any of the cameras to make sure that there's no dust there. I don't like to blow an open camera though, because if there is any dust in the surrounding area, you could actually jam that into the sensor that is found beneath the lens. A little light spray of air on there can help to knock loose some of it, but just don't spray directly or really deeply on them. That can actually damage them. Go ahead and take your back glass, and we're going to go ahead and lay this back down, just aligning the top here and ensuring that it's going on straight, and then running our hands down each side and then also up the top and up the bottom. So now at this point, if we do inspect it, looking down the edges, we can see that everything is sitting completely flat, and this one's ready to get back to the customer pending the final test. One last thing that we do need to do, make sure that we do transfer this over, is take out the S Pen from the old housing and put it back into the new one. That is probably one of the easiest things to forget during this whole repair, because it's something that is hidden and you don't necessarily run across it during the disassembly or reassembly. I hope by at this point you have a little bit better understanding on how to disassemble and reassemble your Note 10 Plus or any other similar device. I appreciate everyone still watching, and if you like this video, go and hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and please comment below what you'd like to see in future videos. But once again, my name is Ben Russell from ProFixerr. I'll see you in the next video.